could take that third one, the chopped one, and put it on air now if you want. Actually, it's fine. We'll just get rocking and rolling. Never mind. That should be, that you don't need to put the guest there on the on air. Just do the normal on air soon there. You can change that out. We don't need to do that for the guests. And that would just be all moving forward. All right, guys, we're going to get rocking and rolling here. We're just getting things polished off. Good to be with you on a Tuesday. A lot to cover on the program. Hammer the like button. Hit the like button. Hit it hard. Share the show with your friends. We work hard for you. The only thing we ask in return is a like in a share and some participation. That would be awesome too. You know, ask questions. Join us in the conversation. A lot we're going to cover. Judah Wickower, myself, Jerry Miller. This conversation has come up quite a bit. If you're opposed to upzoning, are you opposed to housing affordability? If you're opposed to upzoning, are you opposed to housing affordability? I don't think so. I think people could be opposed to upzoning, but also be in favor of creating housing affordability for frontline workers like nurses and police officers and teachers. Don't you think, Judah? Don't you think you can be legitimately opposed to the upzoning and the increased density, but still be in favor of creating housing affordability for frontline workers like teachers, police officers, and nurses? Or do you have to be pro-housing upzoning, pro-density, to be pro-affordability? We'll take a deep dive on that topic. That's an interesting one. What's tickling the brain over there before we get started on that topic? I see the wheels moving.
I think we're all allowed a little bit of nuance.
We're all allowed a little bit of nuance? What does that mean? I have no idea what that means.
That means not everything is black and white.
Okay, I'm going to have you take a deep dive on that statement today on the show to explain how the two are entwined or linked or not. Give us a tweet, retweet on Twitter. Hit the heart button on Twitter. Albert Graves, thank you for sharing. Dylan's Rule, thank you for jumping in on Twitter. I'm ready to rock and roll. We'll talk Hunter Smith, the Brasserie Saison. How do you say it? What's the name of that place?
I think you were close.
What's it called?
Brasserie Saison.
It's cut in half now. You saw that article, right?
Well, it always was, but now
officially,
the other half is going somewhere else.
The other half is for rent, as that story continues to percolate the news cycle. All right, we'll rock and roll. If you have questions, comments, concerns, something you want us to talk about, put it in the feed. We'll relay it live on air.
Quiet on the set.
Good Tuesday afternoon, guys. I'm Jerry Miller. Welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us. We're live in downtown Charlottesville. A lot to cover on today's program. We will talk topics that matter to you and long-form content on a show today presented by Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Integrative Medicine. I was talking with friends over a couple of cold beverages, and we were talking upzoning and housing affordability, and this question came up. If you were in opposition to density and zoning, more zoning freedom, upzoning, does that mean you're in opposition to housing affordability and helping frontline workers own real estate in a landlocked 10.2 square mile city? That's a question I want to ask you. And we can weave Judah in the mix on that with the lower third in a matter of moments. I don't think those are. I think you can be in opposition to upzoning, but still pursue housing affordability in the community for police officers, nurses, teachers. You can be pro land trusts in what our friend Keith Smith is doing at the Thomas Jefferson Community Land Trust and be against density, upzoning density. You can be pro down payment assistance and be opposed to upzoning. The folks that are painting the individuals in this community that are in opposition to upzoning as folks that are furthering a class system or trying to cut off the American dream of home ownership for frontline workers, that's a narrative that's being spun. I want to have the conversation today on the show, and I want you, the viewer and listener, to join us on the discussion on this topic. Can you be against the upzoning and the increased density, the more supply should stabilize price? Can you be against that theory while also still being a proponent for housing affordability in the community for teachers, nurses, and frontline workers like police officers? That topic on the show. We'll talk about Brasserie Saison. Is it Belgian? I think it's Belgian, right?
Maybe.
It's Belgian.
Restaurant
on the downtown mall. Now officially as Keith Woodard's team, the owner of this particular building on the downtown mall, they're like, look, enough already. We need to take part of your footprint, Hunter, on the downtown mall, and we got to at least chop it in half and rent half of this storefront here. I mean, it's been too long. And we're truly seeing the unfortunate fall from grace here. And it's being played out because of I hate to say sense of entitlement, but I think that's clouding judgment, unfortunately. You have not heard a sincere apology yet, and I'm sorry. If you want to rotate the lower third topics on screen now on a one-shot, that would be great too, J-Dubs. Carol Thorpe and Bill McChesney, hello and welcome to the show. If you haven't seen a sincere apology from Mr. Smith, and I think that would go a long way, or at least it's a start. It's a starting place. Daily Progress has another story out. Progress has covered this story extremely well, almost from start to finish. You've had commentary from Chris Humphrey, a chef at the Whiskey Jar. You've had commentary from Laura Fauner, the owner of a restaurant that's had a falling out with the Champion Hospitality Group. And now the Daily Progress is further reporting that Mr. Smith, Mr. Hunter Smith, is behind on even more payment on vendors, including potentially a significant behind on payment on rent with Woodard Properties. And we all found it extremely intriguing on this network, opening this Sazette, or this Brasserie Sazette, or this little convenience store in the downtown mall. The initial plan was grab-and-go sandwiches and beverages to help the lunch crowd that wanted to-go cuisine. The tough aspect of doing that business model in the downtown mall is the rent is astronomically high. I think a grab-and-go model was a fantastic idea, but a grab-and-go model in a standalone storefront, not a great concept. Not a great concept. You want to do a grab-and-go concept, do something like a Luce on the downtown mall, the pasta window. I mean, their rent is next to nothing. And their gross profit per square foot, I would imagine, is one of the best in the city of Charlottesville, that pasta window. You got two people working in essentially a primary suite closet, the size of a primary suite closet. And they pump out damn good food. Damn good food. It's basically an elevated food truck. It's a step above a food truck here. Better quality of life than a food truck for sure. But basically a very similar concept. So today's newspaper has Hunter again in the news. We'll talk about the program. We'll talk about on today's show what we got to do to figure out his PR problem, to figure out the business model problem, and the next steps for rehabilitating an image that over the last 6 months have undoubtedly, it's an image that's been negatively impacted by some business decisions. And that's fair commentary, Hunter, what I just said there. I also want to talk on today's show what should go in the old Anna's Pizza spot. Friend of the program, Terry Hinderman. We have dubbed Terry Hinderman the mayor of Fry Springs. Terry Hinderman is a businessman. He's a real estate owner. He owns the Fry Springs station, the gas station. I think he's a part owner in the restaurant. I know for 100% certain he owns the gas station where the restaurant is located. The restaurant is certainly paying rent to him as the owner of that property. I'm curious if he's also a minority owner in the restaurant. Terry Hinderman lives in Fry Springs, has got multiple lots there. I'm going to be seeing him later today. He also owns the Anna's Pizza storefront. The storefront that has, a convenience store over there and a laundromat. The Anna's location is massive. It's 4,476 square feet, Anna's Pizza on Maury Avenue. The laundromat is 2,475 square feet. Jenny Stoner and Johnny Pritzloff. Johnny Pritzloff gets serious props on this program. Someone should get Johnny Pritzloff in this mix if John Pritzloff is on social media. I think Pritzloff is, and someone send a text to Johnny Pritzloff, call him, Facebook message him, Instagram him. Let Johnny Pritzloff know I'm giving him some props here. I think he's one of the best deal makers in Charlottesville, Johnny Pritzloff. He can put people together at a pretty impressive clip. And he understands the nuanced element of deal making, this commercial broker that works for Tallheimer. He's got a very deep network of people. He knows a lot of wealthy people. He knows a lot of folks that are entrepreneurial that are pursuing business ownership. He's, frankly speaking, got the most market share with commercial real estate in Central Virginia. He's got Hinderman's listing on Maury Avenue. So does Jenny Stoner of Tallheimer. The question I have for you, the viewer and listener, is what should happen to Anna's Pizza? What should happen to that spot? Is a 4,500, let's just call it 4,500 square foot restaurant the future? Or do you chop that up? Do you consider a food stall concept at Anna's? Do you consider a brewery concept at Anna's? Do you make that into 2 storefronts at Anna's? You got a laundromat that's coming up for rent over in that shopping center that's 2,500 square feet. We'll talk about that on today's program as well. You can also ask us questions and let us know what you want to cover as well. Why don't we go to a 2-shot and welcome a man who needs no introduction as we put the lead headline on as a lower third. Alex Erpe is also going to join us today. We'll have the triangle of content on the program, the Chief Executive Officer of Emergent Financial Services. First, good afternoon, J-Dubs. How's the world treating you today?
Not too bad.
Yeah, same. Things are pretty good. Allergies are killing me, but it's warm. I'm wearing a short sleeve Roback. The Roback makes a fantastic shirt. If you're not wearing a Roback, it's a Darden brand. It's a brand that was birthed at the Darden School, and it makes a damn good shirt. It's not an entry price point, but the quality is certainly there and the collar holds up. It's one of the best shirts I've worn. I want to talk housing affordability versus upzoning. Do you think you have to be pro-upzoning to be pro-housing affordability in this community? Because there's a large portion of people that are pro-upzoning that say if you're not on our side of the fence or our side of the line in the sand, that you're not in favor of housing affordability for frontline workers like teachers and nurses and police officers. Very few of our officers, as you know, live in city limits. Large majority, over 90%, live outside the city limits. Where do you want to go on this? What do you make of the overarching thesis or lead of the show? And then we can take a deep dive.
I just think that's never an intelligent argument. In any, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. When you make statements like anybody that's against such and such is not for such other thing, um, it's just a horrendous argument.
It's very polarizing. It's a very polarizing approach.
It's not even that
Let's
it's-
talk about it specifically with this topic, not in general terms.
Okay. I'm not as good at talking about this in more specific terms, but I mean, there's never just one way to skin a cat, so to speak. And affordable housing is not just about upzoning. I mean, that can't be the only metric by which we judge how to create affordable housing in Charlottesville.
We got to be thinking other alternative solutions. And I mentioned the land trust, I mentioned down payment assistance, I mentioned creating jobs that pay better, that are outside of the spectrum that currently exists in this market. All of these are better paths potentially to affordability when it comes to housing. Specific to this topic as it pertains to Charlottesville, it's a partnership with UVA that can help drive this affordability. It's getting the university to consider a payment in lieu of taxes that Michael Payne is trying to push that will help affordability in Charlottesville. It's figuring out a better program from a seniors or folks that are underemployed or out of work, and figuring out a way to offer them some respite when it comes to assessment overhead. It's a number of different approaches. And right now there's a narrative being painted by folks driving the upzoning conversation that if you're not on our side of the fence, then you're not pro frontline workers living in our community. And I want to debunk that. I want to try to pick that apart. And I want to try to give you, the viewer and listener, some ammunition to try to say, hey, not so fast. That's not actually what's happening here. Because you got a loud and organized but very small group on, say, Charlottesville Twitter that lean socialists that are trying to make folks feel bad for not being pro-upzoning, because they say if you're not pro-upzoning, you don't want nurses and teachers, officers, police and firemen and EMTs to live in this community. And that's just not the case. I have questions about upzoning as it pertains to infrastructure, as it pertains to the city's ability to manage roads, to manage increased population in schools. I'm concerned that the city has a difficult time maintaining sidewalks right now. What's going to happen when more people live here? I'm concerned that bicycle and pedestrian safety is going to be in more jeopardy or a much more precarious scenario when more people get here with upzoning. We already have a problem with bicycle and pedestrian safety. We have very, very limited bike lanes and pedestrian opportunities in this community. I just don't want to continue the narrative that if you have beef with upzoning, then you don't want teachers and nurses and police officers living here. Don't let folks push that narrative on you.
It's a false dilemma argument.
Those are all big words here. I'm just trying to talk specifics to Charlottesville. Yeah, those are all big words. I'm just trying to talk zoning and housing in Charlottesville. That's all I want to talk about is the topic itself, as opposed to this false dilemma stuff. Please join me though if you see that I'm missing something on upzoning here.
I mean, you're talking pretty broadly, so I mean, I had some questions about some of the assertions you made.
Okay, what are your questions?
I mean, I'd have to go back and I mean, I agree that it's not a one or.
What are the questions?
I don't have specifics on the questions right now.
Okay. Yeah, this is the topic I want to take a deep dive here, and you know, we gotta shake the narrative, because it's a polarizing, dividing narrative. Okay, and I'm curious to see how the candidates, in particular Bob Fenwick, manages this, because I will bet you Fenwick's going to run on a platform opposed to upzoning. Time's going to tell. He's lived here a long time, and he understands the concept of infrastructure, especially from his time on council. I mean, and J-Dubs, I don't want the viewers and listeners to think that I don't want nurses and teachers and officers and firemen and EMTs to live here. I think they should. And maybe the idea is to get creative. If you're in these specific positions or professions, then you can figure out some kind of down payment assistance from the community. Maybe that's the idea.
You're talking about down payment assistance for a
buying a house.
Down payment on a house?
Yeah. Because we want a community with nurses and teachers and police officers and firemen and EMTs to afford to be able to live in there.
That's fair, but the down payment is not generally the worst part of the buying a house, is it? I mean, the down payment could be fairly static over several different purchases, whereas it's usually the monthly payment that comes up as being,
down payment is one key component of buying a house, and it's often the first barrier of entry, having to put a sizable payment up front that a lot of folks don't have, especially a lot of folks that are stuck in a lease for rent, where they're having to put first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit down. Bob Yarborough says down payment is a huge initial hurdle, undoubtedly a huge initial hurdle from the King of Redfields. Those are the ideas to help our teachers and police officers and firemen live here. No one can see the future, and no one has a crystal ball that can predict what's going to happen. But I just want you guys to use your straightforward thinking skills. If we allow the city, which is at capacity now zoning, basically at capacity now, you got few plots of land that are underdeveloped. You got a few. You got the IGA on Cherry Avenue. You got the big parking lots on West Main, huge parking lots on West Main. We still don't know what the future is for that tract of land that Wendell Wood owns by the Rivanna River on High Street. That's another example of undeveloped land right there. The old candy shop on West Main that's all the way at the back of the parking lot across from where World of Beer used to be. That's another piece of land that could be developed, although there's a hotel percolating in that site. We have few spots that are ready to go from a housing standpoint. I get that. We're maxed out. And if we're maxed out, and we allow more zoning flexibility and we have more people in a maxed out area, isn't that going to create potential more strain on infrastructure? Infrastructure that's already throttled. Would anyone say we have bike and pedestrian infrastructure that's up to par for a world-class city? No one would say that. Would anyone say we have public transportation that's up to par for a world-class city? No one would say that. And the zoning flexibility is just going to strain that even more. Carol Thorpe said, this is what it is. She goes, it's the behavior of a bullying mob that insists disagreement with our solution equates to lack of support to the goal. She says the attitude and tactics Jerry has described have long been, in my experience, a constant form of intimidation employed by a particular group of progressive and socialist Charlottesville. That's what I'm seeing as well. I wonder what the root is or the motivation is for that. What's the root cause or the motivation? Is it income, wealth? Is it wealth disparity?
Is wealth disparity the cause?
The motivation for what Carol's describing in the comment that I just read.
I'm not sure how wealth inequality would be the cause of their arguments.
The wealth disparity causing folks to push upzoning to drive affordability. Some folks, folks are being painted, if you have a house in Charlottesville, oh, you have a house in Charlottesville, you own it, you want to create a gate, you want to put a gate around the Charlottesville city limits and keep other folks from coming in. And that's just not what's happening. Let's get to more comments coming in. This is from Deep Throat. There's actually quite a lot of zoning margin. Many lots capable of subdivision. Many lots zoned for more than single-family house that only have a single-family house on it. The limit is infrastructure. There it is. The limit is infrastructure. We don't have the infrastructure here for this kind of zoning freedom. He also says no evidence has been adducted that zoning is a binding constraint on housing unit production here. Right. Seville Matters, welcome to the program, and thank you for watching on Twitter. We love you interacting with us often on that platform. Dylan's Rule says this is silliness. If you don't support X, then you obviously oppose Y. Is someone to stay away from?
Exactly.
That's what's being spun. We'll see how it plays out. I'm surprised that this has not been decided because you have majority control on council up for election. So you saw a little pullback from Juan Diego Wade a couple weeks ago. Not this past meeting, which was last night, but I believe the meeting that just transpired, the one before last night's, Juan Wade also was like, yeah, this has gotten more momentum and has become a larger animal than I ever anticipated. Kind of echoing Lloyd Snook's thoughts. So you're seeing folks hedge. Interesting time. All right, I want to throw this before we get Alex Erpy in the mix. If we go to the next headline on Hunter's Restaurant, I see a lot of the chefs watching and a couple of folks that work for some of his brands here. Where do you want to begin with this? I mean, the story continues. How does the story end for him?
I mean, he's obviously trying to salvage at least one or two of his businesses.
Right.
I would guess that...
I would imagine that should be Champion. Although he's got the joint venture with the brewer in North Carolina going. So I'm curious what percentage of profits was let go when that joint venture with the brewer of North Carolina, when that JV was created. I wonder what he had to give up profit-wise and control-wise for that joint venture. He obviously gave up brewing the beer, although they're following his recipes. They're going to take a lion's share for the making of the beer, the brewing of the beer, and the distribution here of the pie. Right? Mm-hmm. So if Champion's the one he saved, maybe he's done that with that joint venture, but that pie is much more slim. He's got to figure out a way to keep the fire from spreading. Like, check the contagion.
I mean, I think it's too late for that. It's pretty much, it may almost be fully burned out by now. I mean, all that's left is to...
Got Passiflora.
Yeah. You
got now half of a Belgian restaurant on the mall.
I mean, well...
You still are on the lease at Who's Brew.
The Suzette portion was never really a part of the restaurant.
They used it for, as the newspaper article said, as the dining room, as additional seating area. You read the article in the Daily Progress, right?
Yeah.
It said in the article, additional seating area, waiting area for the dining room. They were utilizing it as overflow for the restaurant, Brasserie Saison.
I mean, has anyone seen it overflowing at Brasserie Saison?
Friday recently? And Saturday nights, it gets busy, not during the week. Friday and Saturday nights. I mean, here's what I would suggest as someone who's in the brand management and PR business. Start with the genuine apology. And genuine apologies in 2023 can be done on social media through an Instagram Live or on Twitter or on Facebook. We saw how Chris Humphrey and how he posted on Facebook, that became news in the newspaper. What Laura Fonner posted about the trials the difficulties that she's gone through at Siren. She did a long post about that on Facebook, and that went viral. I would start with a genuine apology. That's the first step. The second step is to do whatever possible to get vendors that are owed thousands of dollars or back months of rent caught up. Get it caught up. And I would try to do a fire sale of any assets the business has to do this. The newspaper has an article, has a line in the article that he changed his phone number.
Yeah.
You read that? I mean, it's just not a pleasant look right now. So I don't get the impression that Mary Jean Jaggers of Jaggers Communications is working for him anymore.
No, I think they've
parted ways.
Talked about that in other articles. Yeah, I think she is done with that.
Yeah.
Maybe she wasn't getting paid either.
Maybe she wasn't getting paid, or maybe her values suggested that she should be the spokesperson for someone who goes about running his company in this manner.
Yeah.
I mean, when it starts, this is. Can you think of a local storyline, local business that's imploded like this?
No.
Anyone? I mean,
there are very few business owners that have this type of spread.
This is like when Jim Baldy was doing folks' taxes and managing their books and their payroll, and then Baldy went on a bender with people's money, with businesses' money, with their payroll. He wasn't paying their payroll taxes for the businesses that he was representing as an accountant. He was an accountant and a bookkeeper, ran an accounting and bookkeeping service. And he took the businesses that entrusted him with their payroll taxes. They would take, how it works, may have never explained this to you. We have a company that manages our payroll. The money goes from our account to their escrow account, and our payroll taxes are paid that way. They do it every 2 weeks to make sure you don't want to get behind on payroll taxes. And that's one of the deaths of small businesses, is getting behind on payroll taxes. We pay them on time. We do them every 2 weeks. We don't pay them quarterly. We don't pay them every 6 months. We don't pay them once a year. I'm not going to risk the payroll tax exposure. Baldy, back in the day, I'm talking maybe 20 years ago on Jim Baldy, was not paying folks' payroll taxes, businesses' payroll taxes. Instead, was taking that money. Remember, he tried to launch a jazz club in Belmont? He was stealing from Tony at Cafe Cubano on the downtown mall and a number of other small businesses. And Baldy ended up going on the lam, went to California. He had an alias, legitimately a fake name, and was living a completely different life as a server in California on the lam, running away from Virginia and felonious activity associated with his nefarious bookkeeping and accounting work. And obviously it's not with that point there with Hunter, but who has realized, or who can come up with a local business that is imploding like this? And like this means so publicly and visibly.
Yeah.
Like this is publicly and visibly. Other local businesses implode, but not so publicly and visibly.
Yeah.
And that publicity and visibility is the scorn of team members that's caused that publicity and visibility. It's the scorn of folks that got burned. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's definitely brought a lot of this out of the shadows.
Right? Oof. Kevin Yancey says, with a collaboration brewing joint venture, he'll garner 30% max, if that. Kevin Yancey knows the beer business. Thank you, Kevin Yancey. Where are you at, Yancey? Are you in Waynesboro right now? Albert Graves says, what do we want? An overcrowded world-class city? And he also says down payment is huge for a home buyer who has no mortgage portfolio. I'll get to the other comments. I want to get Alex Erpy in the mix. Neil Williamson says, value America. That's a good example, Neil. And Kelly Jackson, a restaurateur herself, says fixing your reputation in the restaurant world is an uphill battle. That's very well said. How is he going to staff anything now?
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be real tough, especially considering that I'm sure the staff in these types of restaurants all talk to each other, and it's not like somebody's going to come into his restaurant with a lack of knowledge of what's been going on. I would think it would be very hard to find someone who's not desperate.
Yeah, I mean, oof. Well said. Well said. I mean, close them and sell the assets. Sell the assets. Anyway, I want to get, Alex, why don't we get you in the mix here? We got the CEO of Emergent Financial Services in the house, Alex Erpy. Do you want to touch that story? You obviously knew about it coming in.
Oh, yeah. I've been reading about it. This isn't the first article on this. Has been ongoing.
It's been a saga.
Yeah.
First, good afternoon. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. I hope everyone's choose the allergy season this year.
It's been brutal.
I don't know if you've been feeling it.
Horrendous, dude.
So I forgot my Zyrtec this morning. So
I'm a Claritin every day. I mean, my throat right now is absolutely on fire. Like literally on fire. Are you feeling any allergies? Do you, Judah?
I'm not having any allergies right now.
Not an allergy?
I couldn't tell you what the issues are, but every few years it hits me just like it hits everyone else, and then in between, for some reason, it seems to leave me alone.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, it's I suspected as much when spring seemed to come really early.
Yeah, and it was a very mild winter. What do you make of this story?
It strikes me as very much the issue. Economics teaches you a little bit about it, that there comes a point when, as a business, you need to recognize what is a sunk cost. In other words, trying to keep something alive for too long just ends up burning you more. Like at some point, like you said, you need to recognize what may not be working, sell the assets, pay your vendors, move on. A lot of this just screams to me, I'm trying to keep this afloat, and you just did the whole deep, just to not pay vendors, to apparently not pay staff on time. That just strikes me as I'm trying to keep this afloat.
Yeah.
And you just did your hole deeper and deeper.
Robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, and that's what it strikes me of, and usually that's a failure to, which as human beings we're susceptible to behaviorally, to not be willing to cut bait on a sunk cost. You see baseball teams as the classic analogy with this. How many times do you see baseball teams run out a player, not because he's good, but because they've already committed $30 million, $50 million to him. For them, they got deep pockets. They can make those mistakes. But when you're a small business, if you keep digging the hole deeper, it just gets worse. So at some point, you have to say the ins and outs are not working. In other words, I can't even pay the basic expenses. I need to cut out those fixed costs and move on.
Alex Erpy is the CEO of Emergent Financial Services. He's the co-star of Today y Mañana, which airs Thursdays at 10:15 a.m. on the I Love Seville network. We haven't talked with you in a while. I've missed chatting with you, and we've had a lot of uncertainty. We've had banks, we've had rates, we've had bank runs, we've had a new labor number out today. We had another sign of potential cooling inflation. We're thinking maybe the last interest rate hike by Powell coming up. Maybe, we hope, fingers crossed, rates start going down again. Where do you want to start?
I think uncertainty is the name of the game right now, because there's just so many conflicting pictures that, I mean, obviously you have inflation clearly persistent enough that the Federal Reserve does not want to stop. They hinted at the last rate hike that the end may be coming, right? Which was a complete reversal from the rate hike previous to that, where Powell said we may have to do this a lot longer than previously expected, and the market panicked. But they very much intimated at the last rate hike, when they only did 25 basis points, that we may be now closer to the end than to the beginning, right? The challenge is, as we've discussed before, it's very difficult to say at this juncture, have we seen the actual negative effects, the full extent of the negative effects of rate hikes on the economy yet, or are we just beginning to see them? I mean, we are seeing them in terms of, obviously, the banks, that they are sitting there. Because, again, what happened with Signature, what happened with SVB, those were mismanagement cases that then become very public. That does not mean, however, that other banks aren't sitting there. They probably are sitting there with losses on their bond portfolios. And that's a direct result of rate hikes. So as that begins to percolate, with the labor number today, of course, for the first time in a while,
down.
There were less than 10 million job openings, and it's not like it touched at 999. I mean, it just blew past that number. So we're beginning to see those concerning signs. The issue is there a lot more to come, or are we nearing the end of that as well? It's just there's so much uncertainty out there, and I think we see it a little bit locally as well.
How so? That's what I was going to ask you.
I think as I look around, I begin to sense just that sense of uncertainty. What restaurants closing here? What looks a little slower? You know, sometimes even today, mañana, you can try to get a sense of where marketing budgets are. And you begin to say, all right, maybe, there's not quite as much money flowing around as there was. And that may not necessarily be a sign that the customers aren't there, but it's a sign that businesses are concerned that the customers may not be there. I mean, I think Chamber of Commerce found the other day the number one concern for small business in this country is still inflation. So as much as the numbers may be easing, there's still a very big concern being seen on the small business side. In other words, before they've even sold something to you as the customer, what they are seeing on their end is still very high prices. And again, inflation came down to 6 in the last number, but the problem is that 6 on top of last year's 9. So from 2 years ago, the small business saying, yes, I'm glad it's not 9 again, but I'm still up 9 plus 6 from 2 years ago. So I still need to pass these costs on to consumers, which is a serious problem. So it's still, even now, the number one concern for small business owners, according to the Chamber of Commerce's recent survey.
What are the clients asking you in Emergent?
To be honest, the clients, the market usually is the number one driver of concern there. The two questions being asked is, do I have to work longer than expected on the financial planning side, right? So,
and your answer?
That comes down person to person. It'll usually be, it's the people on the margin. So in other words, you've always got your people that they've saved enough and their expenses are low enough that they kind of never run out of money. Social Security tends to cover it. And then you've got those people that kind of already knew they were going to have to work into their 70s because they started saving too late. It's those people on the margin that maybe 2 years ago they were thinking, okay, I'm set. And now 2 years later, with inflation where it is and where they're seeing their expenses and the fact that their savings plummeted last year because of the stock market and the bond market, they're sitting there saying, I need to know now. I need to know if I can no longer retire this year or next year as planned, if I have to work till 70 or past. And we're seeing a lot more of that this year.
And does that end up becoming a side hustle, or is that coming up with a new profession later in life? Is that staying at the current job longer?
It's mostly staying at the current job longer. Mm-hmm. In other words, I had planned to retire at 65 because that's what I wanted to do, and now it's saying, do I need to work another 1 or 2 years? And what does that do to my savings, to the longevity of my funds?
So are you expecting a quarter of a point?
I don't think they're going to go. I still expect a quarter of a point. The fact that they went a quarter, I don't think they're not going to go back and do 50 basis points. But I'd be surprised if they didn't do anything at all. I think it's going to be a quarter of a point, and maybe we'll get some hints as to when that would end. At the same time, I wouldn't expect them to start dropping rates anytime soon. They're going to, even at the point at which they stop raising, they are going to try to leave those rates where they are as long as they feasibly can to try to quell inflation.
How do you characterize the Neil? That's a great question, Neil. How do you characterize the level of confidence locally, Main Street locally,
In just the economy?
in Charlottesville?
In Charlottesville? I mean, still high, but I think the concerns are beginning to weigh on people. I think there comes a point at which the fact that you are still renting and you just across the board, right? In the younger ages, you've got people still renting that had hoped to buy by now. That begins to weigh on you. When am I going to be able to afford to buy? Will I ever be able to afford to buy if interest rates are 7 and where prices are? Will prices ever come down? So you got younger people worrying on that end. You've got the older people worrying that they have to work a little more. On the business side, again, I see it mostly in there is not quite a zeal to market as there was, in the sense of my marketing budget needs to calm down a little bit because I don't have extra cash on hand to just try to grow. I need to try to salvage, stay where I am. And I just the way you talk to people, it's nothing anyone particularly says, it's just more the way other small business owners and I do, we talk about things that we kind of, you sense that if there's not a slowdown, there's the concern that there might be.
Deep Throat says this: PPI versus CPI, the gap is closing, which should be a relief for businesses. He also says we're seeing an effect of hikes in the JOLTS data. That was released earlier today, the JOLTS data. I will say this: we work alongside, in a consultation, the advertising agency does, call it 106, 107 clients. And the majority of the ones on our roster, granted we've worked alongside them for an extended period of time, are spending now with advertising. And what they're doing is they're taking market share away from competitors. Because their competitors have gone silent in advertising budget spends. So as their competitors who have not been as prudent with financial management with their business are saying, good God, I can't spend now to get my brand out there. The ones that are capitalized are, and they're taking customers away from the ones that have gone quiet. And I can rattle off dozens on our roster that are currently doing that. And here's a time to be potentially, it's the old Warren Buffett saying. What's the old Warren Buffett saying? When everyone's greedy, be extremely scared. And when everyone's extremely scared, be very, very greedy. That's what the successful ones are doing now. Neil will ask you specifically, is 70 years old the new retirement age? And we should also include, we had this topic with Judah, if you want to weave yourself in on a 3-shot, of whether we want to admit this or not, and this frustrated Judah. And I understand why it could frustrate a team member versus an owner. The years that you're going to be working are going to be longer than 65 now.
I think that's safe to say. I can count probably on one hand the number of clients approaching retirement who are actually going to retire at 65 or earlier.
Yeah. My dad, who is a CPA, one of the most conservative people ever, now he's had the very unfortunate luck of bad health. Had to go to 70, in part because of the costs associated with bad health. Is 70 the new number? Judah, you jump in here anytime you want. Viewers and listeners, how do you feel that 65 is not the retirement age anymore? Just like the topic we had last week, the 40-hour work week is a thing of the past. The more realistic work week might be a 65-hour work week. Alex, and then J-Dubs, you jump in.
I think to be honest, I think Neil is right. As tough as that is to say, the average is probably beginning to approach 70. You're without a doubt, we're past 65. Maybe we're somewhere between 67 and 70, but I'm seeing more and more people. And the issue is you also have a mix. A lot of us now work jobs that involve the mind more than the body. So we do see a lot of people who choose to work longer, right? In other words, they can work longer because they're bought. In other words, if you're in construction, and you have to work till 70, my
You don't
heart
have the
goes
physicality.
out. My
Yeah.
heart goes out to you if that's
Right.
the case, right? But we do see more and more people who say, I intend to just keep working because I worked with my mind, and not only that, but I want the peace of mind that comes from the extra years of work. Sometimes it's not even like I could get by retiring at 67, but if I work till 70, I know for sure that my funds are going to last me till like 105, and therefore I no longer have to worry. So they'll do the extra 2 years because the physical cost of doing so is now minimal. The price is that sometimes it's I feel bad because sometimes you do run across a couple people that you retire at 70, 71, 72, and your health declines much more rapidly than you anticipated. So your retirement is less enjoyable than you had thought, because within a couple years after retirement, you're not actually traveling the world like you hoped you'd be doing because you waited so long.
Judah, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that's a big issue. Is wasting your life for someone that could give two squirts about you. I have no problem with people deciding to work longer because they like to work or because they have decided that they need the money. It's my issue comes when a government like France says, "Hey, here's the new retirement age," and that just rankles. But yeah, it's we are sometimes some of us are living longer, some of us not so much. It's definitely.
I hope to live longer.
It's definitely a shame when somebody gives their life to a business that most likely than not doesn't really care about them, and then their life is shorter lived than one would hope it would be, and they end up retiring and then not being able to enjoy that retirement, which is definitely a shame.
Well, then what's the alternative besides that?
I never said that there's
What is the
an
alternative?
alternative for everyone. I'm not sure. Maybe more compassionate employers. That would be nice, though I don't ever see that happening.
It's a tricky thing.
Such a woe is me. Go ahead.
It's a tricky thing because I think part of it is the fact that the price of living longer, right, is that the health costs have that's where really I think people are beginning to get eaten. Their
Well, isn't the
healthcare
price of
costs
living?
have
The price of
skyrocketed.
living longer is the cost of living longer is more expensive. It's more expensive.
It's more expensive.
More expensive.
So I think we're seeing that. I think the stagnation of wages over the past 20 years has been, I think, a significant part of that, right? Especially given now that we're seeing inflation. You're sitting there, inflation ate, $4,000, I think, from the average American's budget last year. I mean, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And that's through no fault of their own. In other words, they're working just as hard, and their $4,000 just completely vanishes. It's not even that their employer paid them less. It's just the money their employer gave them was basically worth $4,000 less than it was the year before. And so those are just really tough things for people to face. Digest, especially when wages are not remotely keeping up with that.
Jamie Turner, says this. I have a friend whose granddad is a carpenter and he just turned 70 years old. He works every day and he has no clue how he can retire because they rely on his income. Social Security is not enough for them.
For most people, it's not going to be. It's just, it's a tricky thing, and I think in some ways, Social Security has been good and bad for people. Good in the sense of obviously there's no denying it is a pension, right? It is providing something. But I think you'd be surprised how many people do not consider when they are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, that Social Security will not be sufficient.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who then get there and realize, oh, what do you mean I can't live off Social Security? In some ways, it took away the incentive to save because you kind of thought it was going to be there, not realizing that even with its cost of living adjustment, which does not keep pace with inflation, its social security is a little extra to help you get there. It is not going to it's not going to pay for all your expenses.
Albert Graves, he says, I work more than 60 hours a week and in some cases have 2 jobs to work. Warrior AG, we appreciate that comment. Judah, what's on the brain over there?
I mean, there's not a whole lot that I can say other than what I've said. I think that, we're getting to a point where it's going to get rougher for everyone, or for at least most of us. And you've got to make a choice for yourself whether you want to keep on doing what you're doing or find something that better represents what you want to be doing going into a time in your life when you may be getting ready to start looking for an island to settle on.
I think we're looking at Travis Hackworth and Danville, the wife and I save as if Social Security did not exist. Don't plan on counting on it. That's how I did it with the 20s, in my 20s as well.
Same here.
That was the byproduct of being the son of a very frugal CPA. He said, you're never going to have this, dude. Don't plan on it.
That's what I do as well, and that's what I typically advise people.
Yeah, Travis, that's strategic and well played. John Blair on LinkedIn, he says, great local history with the jazz club in Belmont. It was called Bel Rio, and he went there a few times when it was open in Belmont. He also says density can create affordability. However, affordable housing can also be increased if there is much greater build out on existing lots within the existing zoning paradigm. That creates a need for City Council to approve special use permits and to make sure existing lot, setback, et cetera regulations are not prohibiting maximum build out on those lots. John Blair, thank you very much for that comment.
We tried to discuss it a couple of times, even with some office buildings that might be turned into apartments without building new structures.
I mean, one of the things that I would consider doing here, and I mentioned this to some of the viewers and listeners that are watching the show, is taking my position in the Macklin building and building and converting it from office space into micro apartments. Doing what Ludwig Kutner's son, Oliver Kutner, tried to do off of Water Street in the Glass House district. He wanted to build micro apartments where they were 300 square feet, 350 square feet efficiencies or studios. And doing something like that in downtown Charlottesville and then marketing them to young professionals, folks out of college, early 30s that want to be to and from the downtown mall. That's something I've considered doing here. I'm all for affordability. I'm just concerned about the throttle it will have on infrastructure. And I think that's what the folks that are opposed to upzoning, the foundation of their argument is, how is this going to impact our schools and our roads and our bike lanes, our walking lanes and our infrastructure? And I think that's something we got to consider.
I mean, let's face it, I can respect both things. Obviously, affordability is very important to me, right? Because I know I see the value of home ownership, right? I see it firsthand in a financial perspective as well. But I sympathize with people who, particularly, like if you think about why Charlottesville used to be ranked like the #1 place to retire, it's just a lot of people who leave those big cities, they didn't move here so that it could turn into one. You had people like my father. He said, I wanted to get away from what New York City was, right? The traffic and the constant influx of people and the lower quality of life that comes from spending so much time. And I think they rightly are concerned. I don't want my city to where I moved to then become that again all over again. And I can certainly sympathize with that. So it's finding that balance whereby you don't price people out that they can't afford to live here at all, but you don't turn it into something it's not.
This got me thinking on something Neil shared with me. I believe Neil Williamson is still watching the program. He's the president of the Free Enterprise Forum. He shared with me something on Twitter from Bloomberg, which I'm calling it up now, of the push during COVID with Zoom towns, and how Charlottesville undoubtedly was a Zoom town or became a Zoom town as folks got the ability to work from home. Folks in the Zoomtown era, and it legitimately is an era that is now maybe yesteryear, the Zoomtown, were sprinting and flooding to smaller towns like Charlottesville that had colleges or universities and thriving restaurant, arts, and music scenes because of the influence of those universities. That's Charlottesville. Bloomberg did an article, and Neil shared it with me. It was published in late March, and it's called Zoom Towns Exploded in the Work from Home Era. Now new residents are facing layoffs. A lot of the folks that sprinted to the Zoom towns because they thought they could work remotely, they've lost their leverage. The employer now has the leverage in an economy where you saw the jolts. Okay, the employer has the leverage now.
Which
And
we warned about.
we told
in the
folks
Great
this was going to
Resignation.
happen.
These things go in cycles.
We literally on this
And
show told people this was going to happen.
I don't know if you saw McDonald's.
Yeah.
Is
North
now-
America office.
They're now firing people remotely.
And dude, and we're talking about the McDonald's layoffs. These are not folks that are working the fryer. This is their North America office.
Well,
These are people that wear suits to work. That are getting canned.
It's the tech and marketing.
Yeah.
It's all those kind of remote things that, and so they've literally told all those people work remotely this week, right? And everyone's like, they're telling them to work remotely this week. This way you can get a Zoom video or a phone call telling you that you're fired. No, they don't even want to fire you in person. So unfortunately, sometimes the price, right? There's the upside of work from home, and there's the downside. It's easier than ever to be fired because the guy doesn't even have to look at you face to face.
You were just a person on a screen.
Yeah.
It's not even a relationship. And we said throughout COVID this was going to happen. And it's happened. And Neil, I appreciate you sharing the Bloomberg article. And he literally, this Bloomberg article, the author is Charlie Wells. The headline, Zoom Towns Exploded in the Work from Home Era. Now new residents are facing layoffs. People that took these remote jobs in like Bozeman, Montana are being canned, and they're realizing the job market in Bozeman, Montana is not great. And they're in a 30-year fixed mortgage in Bozeman, Montana. Or people coming to Charlottesville that were working remotely in D.C. and Manhattan. These are the first people that are getting canned.
That's what's going to happen. And it is happening. And I mean, Charlottesville's a little more, I think, positioned to weather that because there are attractive things about Charlottesville regardless. I have seen some articles about towns in the West, Montana, Wyoming, that have been devastated because they came in, they turned into a Zoom town. Property prices skyrocketed. The people who had been living there left. And then when these people leave, the town then becomes a ghost town. There are a couple like former Zoom towns that now there's nothing left. Because the people who were living there were driven out. They couldn't afford it anymore. And now the people who moved out there said, it looked great on the Yellowstone TV show, but the winter actually stinks.
You know.
And the winter is rough.
It probably also looked good when there were actual people that lived there and ran the businesses, but once you make it too unaffordable for them and run them out of town, like you said, what's left except a bunch of people who've got money and nowhere to spend it?
Exactly.
So we close with this. Here's what we learned, and smart guy, you can tell. Olivia Branch is thanking you for this segment. She says, "Thank you from a boomer." This is beautifully said, Olivia. She's the queen of Keswick. We hope you got the I Love Seville sticker in the mail, Olivia. She says, "Thank you for sharing this important information for us boomers. I hope to work forever, but I hope to not have to work forever." She wants to work forever. Olivia loves her job. She works at Keswick, but she hopes not to have to work. Yeah, and that's a beautiful position to be, and I hope that's the case for you as well,
That's
Olivia.
my dream for every client, is that they can work as long as they want but not have to.
What is so you're talking retirement at 70, maybe longer. Whether you folks want to admit this or not, it ain't a 40-hour work week anymore. Certainly not in Charlottesville.
Yeah, probably not.
What else you want to get out here before we go today, Manana?
I think the issue is people need to begin thinking of retirement a lot, like how you're going to survive in retirement a lot earlier than we have been accustomed to doing. The age in which people could really just kind of like ride it with your one, like Judah said, ride it with the one company, and then when you leave, there's your pension, and you're trying to set, and you're older. I mean, those pensions are gone. A lot of them have been converted I can't tell you how many people come with a pension They used to have a pension, got converted to a 401k, they like a buyout thing. They have no idea what it's invested in. They haven't looked at it. The days in which those days are done. And so you need the earlier you think about it, the less stress you will cause yourself later, because then you will be able to take some decisions that can have an impact earlier on. Because as much as we talked about, the saving $4 a day with Starbucks coffee, how much that is, that's all well and good. There are going to be a couple key decision points in your life: buying a house, when to refinance, when I saved. There are going to be a couple key decision points that are going to have outsized impact on your retirement. And you need to be thinking about them as early as possible.
Well said. Alex Zerpe, CEO of Emergent Financial Services. Anything you want to throw to him before we highlight today, Mañana? You got everything covered?
Yeah, that was great.
He is fantastic. What's the plan for Thursday?
Thursday, got some good people coming on. We got Taina Fayez Castro is going to come on from Taida Coffee. It's a local businesswoman. So she does some great work. I know Guajiros is a big fan of her coffee.
Love
at
Guajiros.
Taida Coffee. Then Matias Yon from Matias Yon Realty going to come on. We'll talk a little bit real estate there with him. I'm interested to see his thoughts, because every week it seems like it shifts what to think about. As someone who is paying more attention to the potential pool of homes than I used to do before I was getting married, it's amazing how things shift week to week. So we'll sort of pick his brain and he'll share some thoughts. And then Dr. Leanne Petit-Clement from Seville Opera is going to be joining us. So Nick's going to co-host with me, because Nick is a huge
Loves opera.
Opera and Seville Opera fan. So she's going to come tell us about what's coming up at Seville Opera. So it'll be a good show. And as dour as I can be sometimes, I try to be.
I don't think it was
optimistic.
dour
There's
today.
hope. There's a lot of hope out there.
I thought you were very, I don't think you were negative. I think you were fair. And I think you were honest. And you were frank. And you were authentic. And I would want with someone that I was trusting my money with or my retirement with to be straightforward with me too. And to sugarcoat for folks to say that you can still do it at 65. Maybe some can, but that would be reckless to sugarcoat it.
It would.
And to think that if what was the stat you gave? What an impactful stat. The 2023 take-home pay versus, was it last year is 4,000 less? What was the exact
4,000
stat?
less. 4,100, I think, less in the average American's pocket.
Yeah. That right there. Think about that. You got to make up $4,100. You have to make. You're saying at bare minimum you have to make up $4,100. If nothing else additional in your life increases in cost, or no other big time event happens that's going to cost you money, you have to make up $4,100. How are you going to do that besides working more hours?
That's all that people.
That's all you can do.
Especially since the budgets are already so lean. It's not as though.
That's what I'm saying.
People are already tapping into the credit card, so it's not as though they have a bunch of extra cash on hand. That's gone.
Right.
Yeah. So it's true. You got to be honest with people.
You got to be honest, and that's what we just try to do here. And he's honest. Jude is honest. We just try to be straight and real, even if it's tough.
Yeah.
His show is Thursdays. This particular Thursday is going to be awesome. My homie Nicholas Erpe is going to be in the house. Love you, Nick Erpe. He crushes it every Thursday at 10:15 a.m. He's just a very smooth operator with how he manages the flow of the conversation. Judah Wickower, a critical component of the show, the director of all our shows, and frankly, one of the key contributors and just a steadying influence on the I Love Seville show. I sincerely mean that. We will be back tomorrow at 10:15 a.m. with Real Talk. I believe he's got Scott tomorrow.
Yes.
Scott Morris is in the house tomorrow at 10:15.
Yep. Just Keith and Scott.
Just me, Scott, and Keith. Thank you very much. And then the I Love Seville show at 12:30. Thank you kindly for joining us, guys. Have a good afternoon and take care. Alex, that was excellent.
Great show.
Yeah, that was excellent.
Great questions, from you and the audience.
I do.